dude, I feel like everybody's right and everybody's wrong.
100%. Why is this important? Why are we even going here? He's helped a lot of guys. He's also not had success with a lot of guys.
Come in with a purpose, and they're very intentional with what they do and how they do it.
From the majors to the sandlot, baseball and softball share space in one place. Welcome to the farm system.
There he is.
My man.
What's up, buddy?
Good. How you doing?
Good, man. Dude, I have to be honest with you, man. I've been looking forward to this chat for a while now.
I know. I was thinking about you last week, and I was like, man, I got to circle back with him. We got to get that going.
Yeah, man. Look, I went away on vacation with my kids, my wife. We went back home to see some family and stuff like that, and then just trying to catch up on being away and stuff like that. So
yeah,
had a little bit of time carved out between now and about 7-ish. So I just like, hey, let me go fire him a message.
Yeah, for sure.
Let me see what's going on with that stuff.
So
a lot of my followers know a lot about me, right? I've got quite a bit of questions, right, in relation to baseball and then how it kind of relates to golf. And
yeah,
I like to read a lot, but I like to kind of stay behind the scenes a little bit. So a lot of people talk a little bit about how the similarities are, but I don't think they quite say it in such a way like some of the stuff that I've seen you. I think the way you kind of talk about it a little bit more would be a lot more similar to what I think the golf swing is like in relation to the back foot kicking out without it spinning out. Yeah. I don't think, like I know I've saw some of your videos, you've got swing catalyst force plates.
Yeah.
So I've got some questions on you about the vertical aspect of it. I just think that people make way too much about the vertical aspect of the golf swing. I think it attributes in a crazy small amount. Curious how it with baseball. But before we get into that, right? Tell the readers about the viewers, like who you are, what do you do, like where you from, like how did you get to where you got to? Because you got a pretty cool facility. Like I don't know much about baseball. I mean, I'm going to be 50 this year. I played Little League when I was like, 12 or whatever that was. It was never my sport.
No. So I got to play junior college, Division I, finish up in the NAIA, played baseball, pretty high levels as well. With that is kind of went into like the corporate world, was a regional manager for Planet Fitness for years, had like second most profitable region in the world, which all sounds good, but I was just working like crazy and wasn't in the space. I got back in alignment with baseball, actually became a high school baseball coach out in Utah. At the time, the AAA coach, hitting coach out there for Salt Lake was for the Angels. We got connected. I started shadowing him. He is now the first ever hitting coordinator in all of baseball for the Texas Rangers. Nice. Everywhere he's kind of went, like they've had a lot of success. So I kind of like got aligned with him. That was huge. And I basically started shadowing him as he was working with a bunch of pro athletes. Started asking him if I could write reports on what I was seeing with guys, and he could tell me what I was missing. So I started writing reporting all these guys, and we started collabing on a bunch of stuff. And then he started posting on social media about me, and I got hired at a facility out in Southern California. We consulted for a ton of MLB organizations out there, and then during COVID, I was actually about to take a job as a hitting coordinator for the Cubs at the time. And then basically right as I went to go leave that month, COVID hit. And so, the world stopped. And I was born and raised in Las Vegas. So I was like, okay, well, before I move across, go to Chicago and do all that, I'm going to go back and spend some time with my family. Moved back during COVID. 2 weeks turned into 6 months. I ended up getting getting a place out here. Had a business partner come on board. We ended up doing our own facility. We had started kind of the farm since then, but anyways, now to this point, we've consulted for about half the MLB in some way, in some fashion. Sometimes it's like for overhauls. Sometimes it's presentations. Sometimes it's, coming in and specifically doing something designed if it's a certain player or, a certain department that they're really trying to focusing and pulling this in that way. And so I've had a lot of opportunities from that way. And then now, again, on that side, obviously we have like you guys, and I'm, golf has really paved the way into like utilizing technology, and because it's more of a close skills sport where again, like you guys have with force plate data and all these things, like I read so much golf stuff, so definitely big in that way. And a lot of the biomechanists and a lot of when I've gone that direction have usually been very versed in golf, and I brought a lot of that stuff over to baseball. And then also I've gotten to research more myself, like you, with the tech and also with some old school wisdom. And then, I think it gives us direction. We might have thought that it worked for this reason or that reason, but when we actually dive into it, we can actually figure out what it's actually doing and then why it's so useful. And then we can better prescribe it to people and like understand like, okay, great. Like this works for a lot of people, but why? Right. And what is it actually doing? So we've gotten to do that quite a bit. Again, just I see that we kind of talked about that, how you utilize gears. We have a bunch of different ways to measure kinematics, and we have swing catalyst and Bertec force plates in house. When we got the Bertec force plates with Swing Cat here, the only because a lot of force plates, this is another thing, and this goes to your main point with when it comes to the vertical aspects, is that at the time the cheapest force plates are the ones that can measure for vertical. So everybody gets these force plates that are really cheap because they can measure one plane of motion or one vector, right, of force. And so they start to, obviously, if you could only measure one thing and you start trying to search after that one thing, it's just, very easy for people to like really chase down. And so at the time when we got the force plates that we have now as well, there was only 2 of them in the world. It was us and the Cubs were the only ones that had the system setup that we do. And the big difference between our force plates is one, the force plate is gigantic on the front, right? We don't have a small force plate because we have to stride in baseball, right? So, we need a bigger landing area. And then, there's a ball that's moving. So we're dynamic when we stride. We don't go to the same exact spot every time and all these things, right? So, and then also because different pitch shapes and all that stuff as well, we have to be a little bit more dynamic with how we create forces. And so because of that, it causes some different variabilities in like our movement, right? So in any case, we really gotten to do that. And so because of that, we also have a bunch of training products, memberships, all, curriculum that we just came out with, yada, yada, all the things. So kind of just a little background story and like what we do and, what we have out here in Vegas.
All right, so do you do, what do you use? K-Vest or what do you use for that?
Yeah, so we have K-Vest, 4D motion. We also have, obviously the again, fickle with it. I'd rather sensor on body, but they're getting a lot better with the camera systems. We have a 4-camera setup so we can get some biomechanical readings from some of that stuff too. Right now, I still think the sensors, unless you got like, a high level like system, $250,000 system or something like that, like even then, it's a little questionable. So mostly that's what we utilize.
Cool. Okay. So, it's really interesting. I came from an athletic background. I didn't play golf until I was like 20, 23, 24. I was diagnosed with the heart problems, so made me stop playing soccer. The year that I stopped, I had an opportunity to go to France for a tryout for a D2 team there. And then also I had a tryout for the Revolution in MLS. But then I decided the pathway of, my health is a little bit more important than trying to go down that route.
For sure.
I did think quite a bit about like trying it, and then if I succeeded, then be like, hey, I'm good. But the amount of conditioning that would have had to gone into going to play at like there, I was just like, I just didn't want to tempt fate, and I'm still here. So nothing really major, but like it was just something that the doctor and I, when they were talking about it, was just made a decision like, something, it's just not worth it for me.
Yeah.
And then I got into golf, and never once did I ever think I would have anything along this nature and go about that. But like I can do a lot of things. I got great proprioception skills, played elite level hockey. Took me like 3 years before I started playing, professional tournaments in golf. A lot of things that I can do in the past, didn't quite know how to explain it.
Yeah.
I can get way more into the details now because I've got a lot of the tech and kind of playing around with that stuff. So I love that stuff. Like, so I had, K-Vest shit when I was like 30-ish, give or take a little bit, 32-ish. I had balance plates way back then as well. So I was kind of really techie into that stuff. I went to school for for engineering, worked in biomechanical engineering.
Nice.
So it was kind of fun. I enjoyed it. I love this golf thing, kind of bringing the techie aspect into things, and then also the creativity of what a soccer is, right? Into playing, right? And then blending what we do inside, helping people understand a little bit what they do outside. So you can see, I got your stuff. Man, that stuff is really good. Like, guys, like, I'm telling you, I'll start posting some stuff. Like, I've been playing with it for a little while, but when I got it, I kind of left. Really liking it. It's really interesting. that the long water tube thing.
Yeah.
The first day that I filled that thing up, I was talking to Dr. Tyson. I was just like that's the exact sensation that I feel when I'm swinging 7-iron at like 102, 103.
Yeah.
And he's like, really? I was like, as soon as I made like one or two motions with that, I was like, holy shit, like that's the same freaking feeling
Yeah.
that I have, same concept in my head in terms of I'm not trying to get the legs really involved. I'm trying to feel
Yeah.
more stabilization in the legs, a
Yep.
little bit more core,
Mhm.
and then, the shoulders, rib cage firing, trying to get everything out into that club, trying to put as much as I can into that club. And
Yep.
that's kind of what I'm really interested in with you. But I'm going to start
Yeah.
first. Like I've been on record, Manavian, Dr. Tyson, right, and a few of other people that I've kind of talked to, trying to manage all three planes of the forces for the vast majority of golfers is really hard to do.
Yeah.
I've been to Brandon Roby. He has force plates, and he was like, how the hell do you do all this shit? Because like he tell me something to do as long as I understand it. And at the beginning with him, because force plates and then what we're talking about in gears, the vocabulary is a little different. So I was like,
Yep.
what do you want me to do again?
Mhm.
And once I figured it out, it was like I would do it and I would just constantly time it up. And he was just like, I've never seen anybody.
Mhm.
And I was like, but like, it's just how I grew up. Like, I understand
Yeah.
how to move and things like that. So
Yeah.
it's a big help. Understanding how to explain it now is also pretty nice. But I think doing it also helps
Yep.
the understanding and to be able to teach it, right?
For sure.
So I do like that. And then
Yep.
I do have baseball stuff. So like, I'm really curious. Like I do that stuff with some players. I do that a lot with my kids, my young kids, right? For certain aspects that I think would transfer very nicely over to the golf swing. So really quickly, in terms of the diving into the mechanics, the vertical forces in the hitting, like what do you see? What do you want to see? I'm curious.
Yeah, so a little bit different than golf because we stride. So because we stride, you're going to get a vertical hit the moment the front foot hits the ground, right? Because obviously there's a force. As soon as you hit the ground, there's going to be a vertical, right? So there's a vertical spike then. But then just like golf, as you're going into impact, we also get another vertical hit. Now, like you're mentioning, there is a minimum, right, that we see between the most elite players. But with that being said, too, as well, for us, it also depends on pitch height, how you move. For example, if a ball is up in the zone for a hitter, right, which is it would be different from golf, we tend to see less vertical forces depending on how the athlete moves. If he's more of like a flat rotator, right, rather than being more vertical pass, we talked about guys that are more horizontal compared to move more vertical and plane. The guys that move more vertical and plane, let's say like a Freddie Freeman or somebody like that, I would say from the baseball world, is a guy that moves more like this. He's going to have more of like a vertical kind of like up. You'll see his hips like really rise. But again, as you mentioned too as well, those are, while there's a minimum in there, that isn't like the biggest things we're looking for in force plate data. Like you have to check the box, right? But like there, it's like bat speed or, club head speed. Like, yes, there's a minimum, but at the same time, you can't swing at 20, right? But at the same time, just because you have the highest club head speed or just because you have the highest bat speed doesn't mean that you're the best hitter. They just recently this year came out with that in baseball. They made it public that all of the data for what's going on with the bat, right? So they can track all this stuff now because of the camera systems we have and all the stuff. And so they came out with Giancarlo Stanton. He by far has the fastest bat speed in like all of baseball, but he's not even close to one of the top hitters in baseball. And so, again, we started going through some of that. And so we look at force plate data just like we look at like exit velocity, and I don't know if you made some of these same correlations, but what I mean by this is it's a result, right? Like I read force at the ground, but it's not where it's created. It's we are reading the end of the movement, right? So, again, we create these forces from the middle part of our body, right? Proximal to distal. Those forces then get sent into the floor. The ground is a reaction force, right? Like I have to hit the ground hits me back. And again, and also it's responding to the forces that I'm creating from the middle part of my body. So a lot of times, as you mentioned, biomechanists have got this a little twisted at times. And I've talked to so many biomechanists at this point, is just that a lot of times they're saying, oh, like I hate the saying, it starts from the ground up. I hate it. But it's how people interpret that is completely off. Like they think, well, I'm going to spin my feet then I'm going to spin my knees, then I'm going to spin my hips, then I'm going to spin and then that's what's going to get the bat head, and then finally the bat's going to come, right? So like in golf or that, right? Like that creates a lot of dragging. The head never gets delivered. The speed gains up the body are awful. And then so a lot of times you'll see biomechanists, they're like, hey, they'll explain, like how their perception of, again, maybe they never played, but they're a biomechanist, right? And they know what the graph looks like, right? So they're explaining the graph and they're saying, hey, it starts from the ground up. So then everybody tries to spin their feet, right? And so one of the things you literally, you pointed right to it. I had no understanding of ground force, like zero, no background in ground force. But what we did have is we started to understand, I love that you said about hockey, because that's where I started to understand ground force a lot was because of ice, right? And so that's actually where we came up with the idea for the farm boards was because of hockey, right? So we saw in some of the most elite hitters in baseball, they would do that like scissor or kickback is what we call it in baseball, where the back foot will actually go behind.
That would be like the back foot this way, right?
Yes, correct, right? So a lot of hitters and some of the best hitters in baseball, the back foot would go behind. Actually, another thing is young kids do that a lot when they haven't been coached yet.
Yes.
But
then they get taught out of it.
Yes. And so one of the biggest things that's like a big no-no that we've taught for years is like the squish the bug, like terrible, like terrible ground force numbers. Like it makes you move out of sequence. It's something from like back in the day that was misunderstood because we didn't have high frame cameras and we were just taking pictures of how their back foot looked at the end of the swing. And
it'd be the same. It's the same thing with golf. Finish up on your toe and then they're internally rotating the leg. They're manually making it happen.
Yes.
My foot goes up. It's not because I'm making it go up.
Yes.
It just goes up because my hips pull it.
Yes.
I'm not trying to ever lift the foot up.
Yes.
I'm trying to feel way, way like hockey in terms of the slap shot.
Yes.
Trying to feel like the hips got to close a little bit, right?
Yes.
So that I can get everything out into the club. And like that whole spinning out stuff, keeping the arm pinned is like, that's never going to get out.
No.
Like, you can you'll never get it out to the ball.
Well, I also have a background because I did martial arts for years. So I did like Muay Thai. So when I got into Muay Thai and I started learning how they would teach to strike, right? And I got this concept, and I think that because I've watched a lot of your stuff too, is I am striking the golf ball. I'm not dragging through the golf ball, right? Like I'm striking the ball, right? And so they talk about it when you throw a punch, right? Is that like you got to stick the punch, right? Or you at the end of it, right? And all of that is learning. There's the decel side and also to sequencing up the body. And so, for example, when I would watch video when we had bad frame rates, I would see when someone would go to hit the ball, I would see like this hesitation in the pelvis, and I was like, it's not just the turn, and I'm like, what's going on, right? But then when we would start getting, we got frame rates, a lot higher, better cameras, all this stuff, and we can slow it down. And then also too, when you start studying kinematics, and then they actually, this is, again, along with it, Greg Rose and those guys, like I've known for years, like, again, good friends, all the stuff we have, again, we agree on things, we disagree on things. Like I love talking about with them, all the stuff. But back in the day, they did a sports segment where they had Rory, and they were talking about, right?
Uh-oh.
Right?
I already know where you're going.
They're talking about, man, he goes and hits the ball, but he does this amazing thing. As he hits the ball, his pelvis goes back the opposite way faster than amateurs can rotate their hips forward. So not only is he stopping, but he's stopping so hard that his pelvis is counter rotating harder than an amateur could even rotate back to this way. And then they say the famous next statement, but that's not why he can hit the ball so far. And I'm like,
ass.
I'm like, that's exactly why he can hit the ball so hard, And so that again, when we watch hockey, this is when I knew it had something to do with the surface. Is when we watch hockey, every slap shot, they look exactly the same, right? Like every guy, like again, goes into that scissor, type movement. And so we said, man, this has to do something with the surface, right? Like something with the surface. So I talked to a biomechanist, again, Swing Cats, biomechanist. We were kind of talking through a ton, and we built, a really good relationship. And so I was telling him, I was just like, hey, like, I was talking about the ground and how I think that the players use the ground to compensate in a lot of really bad ways. And he came up with this famous line. He said to me, he goes, the ground hides a lot of sins. And I was like, I really like that one. Right. So what we started noticing, right? Like if you make an athlete jump in the air
Yeah.
and try to rotate, their lower body always counters the opposite direction, right? And so, like, you know, for example, if me and you were in space, well, you could still swing a golf club. I could still swing a bat. I could still throw a ball, right? And why that is like, you know, again, across the body, we use these big rubber bands, these, you know, the fascial slings like across our body. And we utilize those systems to create reciprocal movement, which creates like tension. It's like when NASA, when they go to space, they can't use weights because gravity isn't there, but the band still has resistance and we can utilize that to create force. So when we noticed that, so at the facility I was out in SoCal, what we did is we ordered a massive slide board, like a massive, they used it for hockey. Yeah. And we had guys just throwing med balls with it in the weight room. And when they would do that, we would see all their lower bodies counter. And I was like, man, screw this. So I grabbed it, dragged it into the hitting room, told our hitters nothing, like hit. Just hit, right?
You see
and
it
then
right
they every one of them, woo, 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 right? It started happening, right? I'm like, man, it cleaned up so many movements. The bat head was getting out. Yeah. They were transferring energy, smashing balls. Like the direction was good. The spacing was good. All of those things. So then we came up, and as we started designing more, like the problem is the big slide boards, they're not mobile. No. You can't travel with them. You know, they're really a pain in the ass to go in and out of the cage, all that stuff. So, and then we decided like, okay, do we actually need to move on top of the whole surface, or can we have the surface actually move? And then that's when we came up with the smaller, you know, farm boards that you now have, right? To get those, you know, on the ground, right? And that's where all that came from. But that's what really helped me from using those farm boards. It really helped me understand vectors and reading force plate data and understanding which direction I'm putting force into the ground and why and when. Yeah. And so when we got force plate data, when we got to our facility, it made so much more sense to me. And I was even, you know, our hitting coordinator was telling me, I recorded my call with this biomechanist and we were talking through force plate data. And he goes, man, I was on the call hoping, you know, he was going to teach us all these things. And he's like, you were sitting there connecting dots for them. But it's like, well, I was connecting dots because I've seen it practically, not on a graph. I know how it's actually being created and how I would coach it. And then that's what it creates a very symbiotic like relationship between us and like biomechanists across the board that has, you know, been very useful. But I said all that from your original question talking about vertical force is we got to remember one of the largest forces and the forces that we got to be mindful of is our torques, right? Because torque is rotation. So vertical is great, right? Horizontal, there's a time and a place for it, right? But like limited, right? Horizontal more than anything it should be very limited, especially when we're hitting a ball that's coming at us. So we don't want to jump at it because now I lose time and space. So it's like that it's not very useful when we're doing a rotational movement. So there's very limited horizontal you know, force that we get from that side. And then you know, but these torques are really important. And so biomechanists, because they had this preconceived idea where they're thinking about just one rotation, right? Like I'm just rotating one direction and that's it. I'm just going to spin and pull the club, right? Because of that, they were missing some of the other torques that were happening in the swing, especially going into contact and some of the resistance and the things that you were mentioning about how I can get the head out. So now you'll see like Swing Cats team is going out right now and they're talking at golf events all over the place and all the things, and they're talking about like reverse torque, right? Well, if you go back you know, like a year plus ago, right? Like I was talking about reverse torques and I kind of was talking to all the biomechanists like, hey, this is what I'm seeing. We've been teaching this for a long time. Like your ability to put on the brakes, right? And get you know, transfer energy up your body and actually, we think of it like, you know, like, and I know you talked about this too, but like a whip, right? If I take a whip and I put it above my head and I do this, it will never crack. No. It gets up to speed, but it will never crack. If I want maximum speed, I have to pull it back and send the energy down to the end. And so like our body, if we want to use our body like a whip, how hard we stop is really important. And when you go back to like that Rory incident, and then the reason the counter rotation, I've helped people understand this. I always ask people like, hey, have you ever been on a boat? And they're like, okay, yeah, some of them, you know, I'm like, okay, have you ever driven a boat? Right. And some of them are like, yeah, sometimes. And I'm like, okay, so what are the ways you can stop a boat? Right. And they're like, okay, well, you know, there's 3 ways. I can drop the anchor and just let the boat catch and slowly slow down. Okay, that's one way. I can turn off the engine, right, and let it just kind of like the friction of the water and, you know, hopefully slow down. Or, well, boats don't have brakes. So what do they have? Like, well, they have reverse, right? Okay, so if you're in reverse, when it finally stops, what's going to happen? the boat's going to go backwards because it was in reverse the whole time. So when you see like Rory's hips go backwards, it's because he was already in reverse. Even though the hips were going forward, they're slowing down as they're turning. Like I tell people, like when I'm pulling up to a stoplight in my truck, the truck is slowing down, but it's still going forward. Right. So
it started back there.
It started back there. And then when you look at like, you can see this on KVS, you can see this, I'm sure on gears, all the stuff. Our most elite hitters, when they get 30 degrees into the turn with their pelvis, they're already at max speed. And then from that point, they're decelerating. So when people are telling them to rotate their hips as hard as they can, well, first off, I have 12-year-old girls that swing pelvis speeds as fast as our pros because pelvis speed isn't that important. Like it's very easy to hit pelvis speed numbers. But the speed up the body and the speed gains and transfer is far more important. Right. So, and then like I said, people get so encapsulated by ground forces, they don't understand that we got to train the middle, and we call it the middle. And the reason I call it the middle is it's not just the core, right? And you're like fascially, when we actually go across the body, you can see kind of like spiral fascial slings. I don't know how deep you are into like some of that stuff, but some of the spiral fascial slings, you have these big rubber bands that run across their body. And so again, along with that, learning how to stretch those and when and where and how to get tension, how to use them to create a stable, create stability and transfer energy. Like the kinetic chain doesn't make sense if the body's not connected. Like muscles aren't connected to muscles. So how is energy transferring from one part of my body to another? And for example, I think that you did a video of this very similar, or maybe I've also been following all the guys that you've been doing lives with too. They've had great content.
Good, man. They're good.
Again, I'm sitting on a swivel chair, right? If I grab a ball and I toss, like the chair is going to go the opposite direction. Like, again, if I'm standing on the boards and I do a swing, the boards are going to slide the opposite direction. And so like, as my trunk fires, I actually rotate. I almost explain it like you're on an airplane, right? So if you're on an airplane, I shoot jets out the back to make the plane go forward, right? Well, if I want to rotate my upper body, what happens is I use the ground and I twist the ground back the opposite way so that I can propel my upper body actually into the strike. So almost like if I had a jar, right? If I had a jar, if I just let the bottom go and I try to twist the top, well, the whole thing's it's not going to do anything, right? But if I hold the bottom and I twist the top, okay, now I get that. Well, I want to do it as fast as possible. If I twist them opposite ways, now I get a crazy torque that I create acting on the lip, and I can actually create a lot of speeds and get a lot of speed, energy like to flow up.
Transference.
So in any case, the reason I wanted to bring that up, and sorry for the monologue, but was to make the emphasis, like you're saying, is that vertical force, yes, they play a role, X, Y, and Z, but the torques by far are way more important, and the decelerations and the sequencing of that ground force, just like kinematics, if the sequencing and ratios between gas and brakes are not good, there's going to be major problems. And vertical force, it becomes a big deal because it's cheaper for everybody to have cheaper force plates, and then they emphasize that because they can measure it so easily. But
I like that. Like I said, like I don't have any issues with the people who are using them, right? I like them. At some point, I'll get some plates. Right now it's integrated into gears, so it's looking at where the center of mass is. You got to put some of the weights, and then it's kind of calculating things out. So to me, I'm like, that ground reaction force is so small in relation to the grand scheme of things that I would prefer, for me, gears. Let's make sure that the energy being created right between the body and the ground gets through the club, and the club isn't jacking that shit up, because we shafts are a little bit thinner. They bend a lot more. They twist. So if all that shit is really wacky with somebody, it doesn't matter how good. Like a really good player will be able to finagle some stuff, but the average golfer has no chance of saving anything like that. With some of the shafts that I measure, it's like, you got no shot, man. Like, but I just bought clubs. Like, I'm sorry, man. I'm just telling you what I know. Like, you don't have a shot. So I like looking at it all. And like I said, at some point I will get some real force plates. I just don't see the true need of it yet. I think I can do enough and get enough from that, maximizing the speeds, doing some of the training stuff. That stuff that I have back there, that's going to help me a lot more with players. The only thing I haven't done yet is the one that goes on your back yet, that you fill up. But outside of that, like I said, both of those balls. I've already come up with some protocols for the circle ball.
Yeah.
For people, we've already started to implement some of those pieces, which people are like, oh, wow, all right, I get it.
Yeah.
But like in relation to speed, I think you can only generate as much speed as you can stop.
Yeah. Well, and I think also this is the other part with that is I think it's even bigger than that. What we've realized from force play data and also from training athletes, you don't need, so protocol in the weight room would be, you should have almost 3 times the amount of eccentric, right? Like than you do concentric. So, and the reason that is, right, for example, like I should be almost to do like a 3x going down in my squat than what I could actually like concentrically like stand up for. But what we've seen that, and the reason we see that for like elite athletes is like they have elite breaks. And the reason that that's so important, right, is not only for injury prevention, right, because you have all this momentum. The thing is even like in our car, if your car slowed down as fast as it sped up, you would get into a lot of car accidents. Like your brakes in your car are by far way stronger, right? Also, this is the other thing. For most athletes, especially elite athletes, they usually don't have a force production problem.
No.
They usually have spacing and direction issues, right? Yeah. Or again, and again, I'm sure some different things with you guys within golf, but within us, we talk about it in sport, spacing and direction. And now there's so much underneath those two categories. But our point is like, we say force production is important, but force transmission is king. Yes. Like I always say, like, I'm going to put a nail in this back wall. If I run across the facility, crow hop, right? And I swing the hammer, but if I miss the nail, who cares? Right? Like none of it got actually into it. Right. And then if I miss off of it or I clip it or, you know, you guys with balls like fading and, you know, slicing a ton, it's like, yo, like all that. It's like great. You created so much club head speed, but the way that you're trying to create force is the reason you can't hit it square. Right. And so I loved literally on your last a couple lives that you did ago where they brought up, you know, they talked about Tiger Woods and talked about how his dad told him, hey, I want you to swing as absolutely as hard as possible. As long as you can square it up, right? Hit the ball in the middle of the face and you remain balanced. And this is a big thing. This is the wisdom. Balance, if you think about it, right, is equal opposite, but also you got to think about it like this. If I rotate one way really hard, what's the only way I can balance that motion? Well, I have to be able to counter that rotation. And because I don't have brakes, my muscles are literally like a boat. I have to literally fire the opposite direction to balance the movement so I don't spin like a ballerina. Is that you got to think about it. When you get all the speed and the better your brakes are, the later you can stop. Yes. Right. So I have more time to get up to speed when my brakes are really good. When I have really bad brakes, like I tell people, like you could have a Ferrari, but if it had bicycle brakes, how fast would you really drive? Like you wouldn't probably as fast as a bike. Right. So if I knew I could get all the way to here, slam on the brakes right before I hit the wall, well, then I'd be able to run faster, or I'd be able to drive the car faster for longer, right? And so if you want to be able to use that engine, we say it the opposite way too as well with this, is I've gone one step further than like, oh, your brakes need to be as strong as your engine. Like, no. I'm more looking like a 3-to-1 ratio. Like I want my brakes to be so nasty, right? Yes. And that's why when I see guys that have crazy brakes, and once you know, like the tech helps you train your eyes to see it. And when you look at it, you're like, oh my God, like that guy's brakes are unbelievable, right? Like, and you see it, right, where the club head comes out and how hard they stop their body and their club gets through and then it pulls their back leg through and then they finally turn, right? All of these things are so important. And like you said, right, and I know you've been big on that too, is like all the guys that teach, you know, driving the lower half so hard and you know, all those things, right? Like, oh, I'm going to drive my knee. I'm going to just turn, like, turn and let it
turn and burn.
And turn and burn. You know? And you're just going to catch it, right? It again, along with that, right? Especially the reason it's so important in baseball too, is I have a time limit. Like, you know, like it's, those windows of time are really small, right? And this guy on the mound is throwing pitches that are going all these different directions, right? So because of that, right, like that I got to be able to create force in a very small window of time. And again, it's a lot like fighting. My opponent creates small openings, like he opens his hands or he ducks or he opens his face. I have a very small window of time to hit that strike and hit that spot. If I try to throw a haymaker, by the time I get there, he's gone. He's moved.
And you're getting hit.
I'm getting hit and I'm exposed, right? So that's where, you know, that's where for us, like it became such a big thing, and why I think in baseball you see that a lot more. But everybody's been tagging me like crazy because, you know, obviously now, like, as everybody's been seeing some of the top players in the world, right, with the back legs working behind them and, you know, like, you know, Scotty and all the things. So I've been getting tagged in all these things because I've been talking about this, you know, for years. And the people, you know, they're like, and some of the top hitters in baseball, now that we have so much video and so much things, they're like, wow, when you see it, like, you can't unsee it. And understanding like why all that stuff happens. But yeah, anyways, I think that those become big, which obviously pulls in the water bags, why those things are so important, because they're so brake heavy. And you can train the eccentric portions of what you're saying. Like, man, when I crush a ball, this is what I feel in my core. This is that deep stabilizers, those deep, you know, core muscles, those deep stabilizers in my pelvis, like all, you know, that counter feeling, right? I even saw, I saw it too. You had him on your show the other day too. I know you have two buddies that you
Scott
quite a bit. Who was it?
So Michael Manavian, I got Dr. Tyson, and then Scott.
Yeah, I think it was Scott.
Yeah, he's the one from Florida.
Yeah, I think it was Scott. So Scott has the water ball, and he was going like this, and he was stopping it, like going in the contact, and I'm like, we do very similar things of like these stop swings or with the water ball themselves. The reason that the water is so important is it gives you a crashing effect, right? The water, it uses your momentum against you, right? So just like the bat head would do, or just like the club would do, the faster you swing it, the harder it is to stop, right?
To stabilize
I tell our pro guys, if a little kid had your brakes, oh, he would be disgusting. He'd be so good, right? The problem is your ratio, your engine, it's so much easier to train our engine than it is to train our brakes, because I can hit a ball without very good brakes, right? It's just not very efficient, right? It's not I can make a whip get up to speed without using my brakes. Yeah,
a lot of people can. Yeah,
100%, right? So managing that ratio is most important, and that's where, again, like the water bags, the water balls, all that stuff becomes a super useful tool for us. And again, like, we didn't create those; they're using NBA, they're using, you know, a lot of other sports have been heavy on water bag stuff. Again, we just have protocols for what we do for like rotational athletes because it's so important, you know, specifically for them.
Yeah, like I said, like I've never seen them up until I saw them with you, and we talked about it, and then I started to do some research, and then I started to see like they're everywhere, and I was like, holy shit, like nobody's ever really talked about it in golf, right? But like I said, like the water, the stabilization, the acceleration piece to it, the balance, the small muscles that people have to activate to be able to control themselves so they're not getting thrown out of, you know, I call it chaotic balance at the finish. Right. I don't want my body all over the place, but it's dynamic and it is chaotic. Right? And then you start throwing slopes and stuff like that into
different.
Us.
You guys are swinging different clubs. It's not the same club every time, right?
Yeah, you're not trying to hit it the same way. You're trying to flight it, and I've got a ball uphill lie. It's like, so your dynamic balance is got to be controlled, but it's still the acceleration, deceleration. It's still the timing of all those pieces. To me, it's still a lot more of like the horizontals and the frontal torques, right? Than it is more of the vertical torques. Like Tyson and I have talked about is like, if I had to teach golfers, or somebody came up to me like, how would you teach a golfer? I'd never teach anybody to gym. I'd be focus on because golf is on the ground, right? You have to hit the ball, then the ground. And if you're starting to miss where the strike location is from the ball to the club, and then from the club to the ground, you start missing all that. Like, who gives a shit how much vertical you have? Well, like, you're not hitting it solid. You're not transferring everything. You're not going to control the ball, right? And then you got to remember, like, we're clubs are all tilted on a horizontal plane. That the vertical plane only destroys those pieces. So more horizontals for golfers, because they slice the shit out of it. They don't know how to stay closed enough. They don't know how to get it out enough, because they create a lot of speed and get nothing out of it. Is verticals, like, we're going to go chase verticals. Like, holy shit. Like, come on, please stop.
And literally, like your point, the other thing is it's a misinterpretation by people that are reading data from this way. Everybody thinks, well, if I create a very biomechanical or strength lens, is to think more force equals better, right? And that's not always true. Like, so for example, like on the same side of this, just because I create more ground torques, even torque, even though I create higher ground torques, it doesn't mean that I'm gonna have the top club head speed. That's not how it works, right? And so sometimes because I'm trying to maximize those torques, the verticals or whatever. That's literally why I have slower club head speeds, right? So it's how I create those forces, how I create speed really matters. And that's why I loved, and that's why I reposted in your live a while back ago, where Scott was talking about that. He was like, hey, I'm not a big fan of just swinging as hard as I can and say, I don't care about technique, because we would never do that in the weight room. We would never go to the weight room and go, hey, I don't care about your technique. Just lift as much weight as possible as fast as you can. We would never do that. If you go to a martial arts studio, they would never tell you go in the back and try to punch this thing as hard as you can, and then we'll clean up form. Because this is, and the reason that is like, for example, if I teach you to be fast in a large window of time, that doesn't mean you're going to be fast in a small window of time. So just because you can throw a haymaker doesn't mean that your cross is going to be really good, right? And that's why you see the difference between like a street fighter and like Mayweather, right? And I call it like I call it like an arcade game, right? You go to the arcade. You go to the arcade and you go, hey, let's punch this bag and let's see how hard we can punch this bag, right? And when you do that, and you have some rando from the street try to punch that thing as hard. What's up, dude? When you see some rando try to come up and like punch the bag as hard as they can, they might have the same force and speed, as Mayweather. It doesn't mean that he's gonna be able to knock Mayweather out in a fight. Right?
He wouldn't even touch Mayweather.
His arcade number. You did a massive haymaker, throw hop, swung your fist, and created the same number. Awesome. That doesn't mean that you're going to be able to create as much force as Mayweather does in a short period of time. He's already hit you 4 times, pivoted, changed direction, and knocked you out. So you got to understand the context of the sport, and you got to understand what we're actually in the adaptation that we're actually chasing. That makes sense of the data and like what it means. All the data needs context.
Well, what you just said is like so key, is understanding the sport, understanding the task, understanding the concept, right? You have your sport in baseball, and you got a little bit wider field than what we play in golf, right? Ours is more of a reverse pyramid too, right? Because your fairways are wider. As you start trying to get to elite level golf, I got to hit it closer to the pin, which is a little bit smaller. So is there some speed that goes into the equation? Yeah, but is everybody going to play elite level golf? No. Can people play really good golf? Yeah. Like distance is just like, do I have enough distance to play the length golf course that I'm playing? Well, then if you don't, just go 1 tee forward. But if you can't control the strike, you can't predict the curve, well, you're never going to be able to score. Now, to score on a longer length golf course, I've got to be able to hit it a lot further, because it's really difficult to go play a 7,300 yard golf course if you're only going to hit the damn thing, with driver 200 yards. It's like impossible to go shoot 65. Like you got to like hole shit out. Like that's not going to happen. Right. So to always try to go chase golfers in speed, I think is silly. Like back, when I was working back home, we did some stuff with some players with like no pins. Right? Don't know where the pin is. Now what are you going to do? You hit the middle of the green. Right. So you put the ball in play and you learn how to do a couple of things. So for every scoring level and then for every tee level that you're playing, there'll be certain facets that you have to have. And if you don't have them, then you can't play it. But if somebody can't score at a longer length, like what I do with some of my juniors and playing, is like, you play here, or you're shooting 85. All right, let's go see how well your scoring skills are. Let's move up 1 tee box and let's see what you shoot. Okay, well, it's still shitty. Okay, let's move up 1 more tee box and let's see what you shoot. Still shitty. So it's got nothing to do with distance, bud. So let's not worry about verticals that are only going to add a little bit of this. Let's not worry about trying to hit the ball further. Like you have no control over it. Let's go gain some control over it first, and then we can teach you how to create some more speed later. If you're going to want to become elite. If you're not going to want to become elite, then there's no point in speed training.
Well, and I also think it's the other thing too is with it. Like for example, like us removing the tee is like removing the fence. We go inside the cage, there's no fence. There's nowhere to hit it over. So instead it changes the goal, right? And so it becomes much more about squaring the ball up when we get inside the cages and your ability to be able to do that, right? But then the other thing is again, like I have no thing against speed. It's just that we have to manage our ratios. Speed undoubtedly is obviously important, but how we train speed really matters. We can't just, I always call it like the caveman mentality where it's like, I have big stick, I swing it hard, I hit ball far, right? Like that's very like caveman thought, right? Like how I create the speed really matters. And I just want to be strategic about how I build force and how I build speed, and make sure that it's within good form and good technique within the same windows of context that I have within my sport.
Yeah. And that's basically, every sport has their own context, right? And then their own tasks. Soccer, right? If it's a free kick, I've got plenty of time. I can take a bigger run at it. But if I'm inside the 18-yard box and I just happen to have enough space where I feel like I can trap it and drop it and kick it, like I can't test it, let it come down and take 5 steps back and then run forward, right? I've got to be able to contract muscles and understand the sequencing to be able to fire the foot as soon as the ball hits the ground. Like that ball might depend, and then it would depend on, do I want the ball to hit the ground? Do I have any time to hit the ball? To hit the ground? And then how high do I want it to bounce, right? And then the timing aspect of that, and then still the firing and still the braking aspect of it, so I can get that ball energy in a very small amount of time.
Well,
right?
and you made that great point too, that for example, between golf and baseball, well, I got to keep my eyes forward. So I can't do the same turn that a golfer does and have all this extra time to get up to speed. Because of the context of the sport, I have to stay this way so I can track. Right. And then also on top of that as well, it makes me have to be strong in different ways. And what I mean by this is like, I don't have the ability to throw a haymaker because of the task. Right? Like the haymaker would be if I could completely turn my, like you see guys do speed training, right? Where they like completely turn and then they're jumping and swinging as hard as they can. You can't do that when a ball is flying at you like that.
You're not going to even do that in the golf course either, because you got to put the ball in play. It's like, so it's like, oh, look, I'm getting 15 miles an hour faster. It's like, you made a practice swing, no ball.
Yeah, 100%. Right. And
what's the point?
Yeah. And that's where, again, along with that, it's like, hey, we're going to train, like our hitters, we have a lot. So we've done both. I'm going to say 2 things that are controversial, but it'll be good. Right. Yeah. The one thing is I've had players, I'm sure you had as well. I've had players come in, lower their bat speed, but their power numbers go up. Yeah. Right. And what I mean by that is now all of a sudden they're hitting it square. Right. They got way better spacing. They have way better direction. They're hitting, again, the club head going fast is great if you hit it square. Like, if you don't hit it square, great. You're clipping off the ball. You're not going to get the distance. You're not going to get the ball speed. That's going to come from the opposite way. So that's very important, where we've had speed go down, but distance or power for us go up, right? Yeah. The other thing is the other way. We've had guys that get higher bat speeds, but it's because we're cleaning up sequencing and then we're training them speed within that technique. And now their speeds go up, and it's like, yeah, your guy has speed and our guy has speed, but the speeds are not equivalent. Yeah. Our guy has speed with good technique. Your guy has speed with bad technique, right? So if you're stacking bad technique, you're stacking bad technique and adding speed to it. Like we would never do that in the weight room. Oh, your form is terrible. Yeah. Oh yeah, let's try it faster. Like no,
I always tell people like your form and your technique sets the ceiling for the skill. Yeah. For the sport, right? Huge. I've never seen like shitty technique and shitty form become an elite level athlete. And then, in our sport, people always bring up like a Jim Furyk swing. And it's just like, something like if Scott, it is making too much sense, huh, bud? But like, it's the same thing. Like I always used to tell people, it's like, all right, so you pay too much attention to the way it looks always and not understanding the task and how things move. Yeah. Because everybody, if you look at Jim Furyk and you know who the hell he was, you'd be like, "Oh, that shit ain't gonna work," right? Yeah, yeah. But if you put him in a box and all teachers are behind him, and he's hitting out and you can't see the swing, and he's fucking firing the balls, and you're like, "Oh my God, he's got great technique, great form," and then you look at it because it looks odd, you automatically assume that it doesn't. It's like the same thing. I posted something a long time ago about, oh, look at all these swings are different. No, there's a lot of similarities within that. Even though it might look different, there's still a lot of similarities. And that's kind of where like my curiosity with you is like, even though they might look different in hitters, when you're looking at some of the 3D stuff, I bet you see more similarities between the people who are good than the people who are shitty.
Well, it comes back to the science behind skill acquisition with attractors and fluctuators. So what the attractors, basically what this is like the best in the world do things that other players don't do. Right. Yes. And yes, there is differences between the best in the world, but there is more similarities between the best in the world than there is differences. Absolutely. right?
Absolutely.
And so undoubtedly there's differences. There's definitely differences. All of us have different arm lengths and hips, anatomy, and we've done different training. We have different injuries. We've had different mindsets. We have, all these things are differences, right? But for example, like, again, for like our most elite hitters, our top level producers, all those other things, those ratios that I was talking about with force plate data, they're there. Like if the guy doesn't counter rotate and I don't see these things, I'm like, this guy's really not efficient. Yeah. And again, the likelihood, especially at the highest level of the game, for you to be more athletic and stronger than everybody else that's also an elite athlete around you, very low. Now, if you're at the amateur levels, you might be able to be way stronger, way more athletic than everybody out there and get away with some things, right, in X, Y, and Z. But, again, at the elite levels, that's very difficult to do. Like all those guys are fast. All those guys are strong, all those things, right? So, and then the other thing I wanted to say with this too is like you mentioned, right? Like it's super important when you look at attractors, right? Like when you go into that side of skill acquisition, is understanding that like, we want to deepen the wells of like, for example, this is actually a big one that happened, and this will tell you, you might have known this without knowing this. If you're like, well, I see all these differences. Okay, right now you can close your eyes and you can see Tiger Woods' swing. Why? Because he swings the same way, almost identical, almost every single time that he swings, right? Or like, and this happened literally with Greg Rose. He actually consulted for an MLB team. He posted the MLB hitter, just his 3D animation. That was it. Everybody goes, that's my Trout. That's my Trout. That's my Trout. So what happened was the team had to reach out to him. He had to take down the video because everybody knew that it was Mike Trout's data, and he wasn't allowed to share Mike Trout's data. So again, what I mean by this is like, we know that elite athletes move very similar. And this is like the old school mindset of understanding, like, because they started, there was this wave of skill acquisition, that kind of moved into the sport of baseball. I don't know how it was in golf, but in baseball, skill acquisition kind of moved into baseball, and they started saying, well, no movement is exactly the same. Every movement
skill trumps technique.
Yes.
Yeah,
so it's like everything's going to be different. And it's like you're stomping on the wisdom of like, yes, but I'm trying to be consistent as possible. I'm trying to be, again, when there's no variables, right? When I limit the variables as much as possible, I need to be consistent, right? And then when I can control my movements, now I can make slight changes. I can make slight, based on the environment, based on all the things. But if I'm one of the biggest variables, and like you want to see somebody with a bunch of options, go get a little kid that just started playing. They got a million options. Every day they come in and you try to work with them, he's going to have a different swing. He's all over the place, right? So more options isn't bad. And then you go into skill acquisition of like Bernstein's principle of degrees of freedom problem, right? So the degrees of freedom problem is, imagine getting into a car and having 15 steering wheels. Like that, having more steering wheels and having more options doesn't necessarily mean it's better, right? And so that's where for us, like you want to see, like, again, I got a puppy right now. He's got a lot of steering wheels. That guy's legs are all over the place. He's all, like, he can't control the motor. He can't control his body very well. So what happens is elite athletes actually eliminate options, but they keep the right options. And so that way, when, again, for example, when they're reacting or they're moving at a really high rate of speed, their brain builds those neural pathways that become the dominant pattern. The reason that they're so consistent is because they deepen those wells of attractors that they can't do it wrong. Their basement is even good, right? Like everything, when they're bad, it's still good because they practice. The reps matter so much. And that's where I almost think of it like this too, is someone explained it like, it's like you're walking up to your house in the driveway, dad's got his perfectly mowed grass, you walk through the grass one time, the grass is okay. But now every day you get home, you walk through the grass, you walk through the grass, you walk through the grass, you walk through the grass. Now you're building a path, right? And now you can't tell the difference between where I'm supposed to walk and where I'm not supposed to walk, right? And then all of a sudden, like, again, along with that is like, this is just like, and I know someone's listening right now, like, man, I wish that was my problem. Just like you move like crap consistently, the elites move really well consistently, right? Like they move, it's a movement signature. When we look at kinematics, I can tell you right now, there's multiple of my hitters. I can look at just their kinematics, never see them swing, and be like, oh yeah, that's Jason. Oh yeah, that's him. Because they do the same kinematic signature over and over and over and over again. Is there small variances? Is there small aesthetic differences?
Small.
Sure.
Small.
Yeah, 100%. But the overall movement is very similar on every single ball that they hit. Like, again, for example, for our side of things, and again, you probably have your own examples. In baseball, Mike Trout doesn't come up and all of a sudden look like Josh Donaldson. Josh Donaldson doesn't come up and all of a sudden look like Mike Trout. They have completely different movement patterns, different signatures. They move, and again, is there overlap between all of them? That is very important with like the forces of when they happen, that, you know, all the things, but they move, like one's super loose and very mobile. The other one's really tight and has very little hip shoulder separation. Like they are very different movement types, but when it comes to like the absolutes, they both get those done. And again, Mike Trout does it better, which is also why he makes more money and has had a longer career. You know?
And that's the thing, right? So, but again, like, have you noticed, like, so even some of like I've seen some of my, you know, higher handicap golfers. Yeah. Right. Even though their motion is bad, their kinematics are gone, but they can repeat their action pretty well.
Yeah. I would say that too. Like, again, I always tell guys that, like, you know, again, like I can tell when someone's done a lot of reps, but poorly.
Yes.
Right. Like we call it, like, I had this when I played. It was called, I used to call it tee-itis, which is like, for us, is like we only hit off the tee all the time. Okay. We hit off the tee so much that we start conforming to the task. The ball is sitting here on the tee. I start like golf. I start turning my shoulders more. I start, because that's the only, I had no one to toss to me a lot of the times, right? But I did so many reps that's how my brain, that's how my body wanted to move. Yes. Right. So this is where, along with it, is like, yo, when we measure, for example, our pro guys, I'll give you a perfect example of this. I'm sure you see the same data in golf. Our pro guys, when the people will ask us, why do you measure their exit velocities, their kinematics, and all that stuff off the tee? Because when they face live pitching, it's not that. Why wouldn't you want to measure the same task? Well, I'll tell you why. Our major league hitters, they're within 3 miles an hour of every ball they hit off the tee. They hit it almost in the same spray of the angle it comes off their bat, the same spin almost every single time they hit it off, because they're so consistent. Our amateurs are all over the place. That spread is gigantic. And then this is the thing. I tell people it's like a leaking pipe, right? A leaking pipe. When there's a little bit of water pressure, it drips. Yes. When you put pressure on that pipe, it sprays. And so now as I go up, now I add a variable, a front toss. Yeah. You know, well, the pro guys are within 5 miles an hour. Okay, they gain 2 miles an hour of bandwidth. The amateur, 15 miles an hour of bandwidth. They're all over the place already, right? Then we get into like batting practice, machine. You keep adding variables. We see like big variances in between, where a pro guy he's way more consistent with his actual results, right? So in any case, you can see with guys that have practiced with a really bad swing, but they've done it over and over and over and over and over and over again. They're really consistent, but just because you're really consistent doesn't mean that it's a really good move. Yeah. Yes. You know? Absolutely.
I agree. And then you start to kind of get into the movements are the same. That's why I like the indoor environment. Yep. There's more feedback. Yep. It allows to create the opportunity to have more repetitive, better reps, right? Because again, like when you're trying to overwrite an old program, like I think one of the worst things somebody can do is just go to the range and then not have their feedback station, not have video, not truly understanding the task. And then even within like, you know, lesson takers, people take a lesson and then they think they're going to go out and do it on their own. You know, vast majority of golfers and amateurs, maybe you might agree, maybe yours would be an interesting one there. Yeah. They've got no ability to understand the cause and effect and then what to chase, right? Well, so it's like going out and then trying to do that stuff on your own. It's like, you know, by like, honestly, like you're not going to do it. Like,
I think it's twofold. I think it's twofold to your point there is the first thing that I got to keep in mind is that when I go, sometimes I can't understand something because I'm too far away from it. And then sometimes I can't understand it because I'm too close to it. Yes. When it's you, like Mayweather needs a coach. I need a coach. Sometimes I get so frustrated, I get out of my own game plan. I need someone to go, hey, stay focused. Like,
bring it back down.
Yeah, right. My emotions start getting me. And then also too, if you understand how the brain, when you get that emotional hit, the frontal, your prefrontal cortex shuts down. You can't think. right?
Yeah.
So your brain doesn't
Then you're
work
dead.
really well. The adjustments, right? I'm sure you
Yeah.
too. I'm in there hitting, my swing feels like crap. I start getting mad. And then I need my hitting coordinator to be like, hey, you should try, this drill. And then all of a sudden I start smashing balls,
Yeah.
right? And I'm just like,
Yeah.
I need a coach
Yeah.
too. So that's also a big part. So you take the emotional side out of it, right?
Yeah.
But then you also have, like you said, an amateur that isn't aware of what they even need to do,
Yeah.
right? So they don't know what's wrong. They don't even know what they're doing. Like a lot of times I love when I start coaching athletes, it's like the feel versus real thing, right? They think I'm like, hey, feel this, right? I'm like, I want your hands to be super far away from your body or something like that, right? And then I show a video. I had a hitter do it to me the other day. Plays for Cal, really good hitter, all this stuff. He's like, we did a thing where I wanted his hands like lower and like here, right? And he's like, hey, I tried that today. I felt like I was yanking my shoulders a lot. I wanted to make some other adjustment. I said, well, can you send me some video so I can see? He sends me the video. His hands are up by his head. And he's like, dude, I swear to you, I thought my hands were low. And I'm like, yes, because and even Tiger at one point, I watched a video where he talked about that, where he's like, man, when my feels and reels are lined up, well, it's a magical time. But like you got guys in baseball, like JD Martinez is known for this. So JD Martinez was a guy that revamped his whole swing, a really good hitting coach that works for the Dodgers, like Van Soyak, like repatterned him. He did, and again, made these major swing changes, but he was a big feel versus real guy. He's not super athletic. He didn't have great feel for his body. So he really relied on video to give him feedback on how he was actually moving. So he's famous now. He won't take more than 5 swings without looking at video.
Video is everything, because you gotta reaffirm what you're doing. Because I've never met anybody who's taken a lesson, is going out to practice it, come back, you put them back on video, and it's like, you didn't use video, did you? Well, I thought I was doing it right. Like Bud, I understand. Like nobody purposely goes out there to practice the wrong thing.
For sure.
But proprioceptional skills is so hard that you need to be able to quantify where we are in time and space. Understand how to move my joints to move the club in time and space. Understanding the contraction and the muscles, right? Which ones have to contract to move the club in time and space. Then we've got to be able to calibrate our feels through video. And if you're not using video, you are so dead. It's not even funny.
The word that you just used, I've been using it so much lately, calibrate. I've been telling people that all the time. I say, listen, this force plate on the ground is 70 grand, right? The hardware, 70 grand. If I don't calibrate it, it's not useful. So you can have an elite athlete if he's not calibrated. And then also too, the mistake you make is that your body is the same as it was yesterday. It's not the same. Like literally every cell in your body replaces itself. Your nose has replaced itself. Your ears replace itself. Like it's like the days of how long it takes in the years. Like everything on your body is constantly changing. The tensions in your body change every day. If you sat on a plane, all day yesterday, guess what? Your hips have started to tilt a little bit. You starting to have some of these asymmetries are starting to build because you've been playing more pickleball lately and yada, yada, yada. And then now all of a sudden too, oh, you know what? I got a baby. So I've been holding that baby on the right side of my body and I've been carrying them around all the time. All of these things. And then also too, your CNS is constantly changing, right? Like it's a computer that's always analyzing. And then like you look into like the fascial system. Well, again, the fascial system, the proprioceptors that are inside of my, like, it's like, I think it's like 6-to-1 is what they've said. It's crazy how much, again, like when, and again, so your fascial system, again, for sense, right, is when you go to burn your hand, like let's say you put yourself on like a stove, your fascial system sends a signal way faster than like any of your other sensory organs can be able to reciprocate back to your brain. And so that's what keeps you safe. So like, as these proprioceptors and these tensions change, I'm trying to see if I will think of it like a rubber band, right? When it's pulled really tight, when I flick it, that energy goes straight to the end. But I got a whole bunch of slack in here. When I flick it, that energy doesn't transfer very well. I need to pull it out and get it tight so I can transfer energy very well. It's like a guitar string. So like, a lot of times too, like when I'm sure you've got your own version of this, but hitters will go, dude, I just feel like I can't feel the bat head. I don't know where it is. It's just like it's gone. It's just like floating out there, right? And I know that there's something wrong with how they're loading. Like they're not pulling out the slack, so they can't feel. They should be able to feel the end of the bat head, and like they can't, right? Because they've lost it because of those things, right? So, in any case, I think that that's a big place. Is like you said, is like every day. And that's why it's so important to get consistent reps in, is because your body is constantly evolving, changing. And again, you can't
go back to you can't use yesterday's feels or last week's feels when you played great.
Yeah.
Because your body and all those things are changing. my task is the same. The task never
Yes.
changes. I'm trying to golf. I've got to hit the ball solid. I've got to be able to control my distance. I've got to protect the curve. But for that day, I might have to adjust some feels and stuff because the ball isn't going where I want it to go, or not
Yep.
curving the way I want it to
Yep.
curve, or I'm not hitting it solid enough. So, okay, what are the pieces that revolve around hitting it solid? I'm not going to go, I'm just moving too much weight on my back foot. Like, you're going to open up a can of
Yep.
worms because you might be forward and it might be just more wrist angles that are creating issues. Now you're putting your body even more forward, just now you created even more chaos.
Yeah.
I'm going to go get my video because I have video of when I pured it, like, and now I'm going to go and compare, like, what the hell was I doing back then? It's like, oh, all right, well, I need to adjust this piece. When you start going by feels alone, I think you open up Pandora's box. And if you start to do that stuff when you're on the golf course, like, you're in trouble. Like, I think in golf, like, you have to be able to go on the range, figure out what I'm doing, find some sort of simplistic mechanical thought, some sort of feel tempo thought. And I've got to kind of try to lock that in as much as I possibly can, go on the golf course with those concepts and understand, okay, my ball flat does this. This is my pattern. This is what it's doing today. The ball's above my feet. The ball's going to want to do this a little bit more. The wind's kind of coming from the right.
Yeah.
So I've got to counteract these pieces. I've got to pick a target that's not the damn flag right now.
Yeah.
And I've got to trust my training that I can execute that task.
I always say this too, right? The other thing is let's say yesterday I crushed. Like, I just felt amazing yesterday. Yeah. Well, what happens when I feel good? Well, you want to keep hitting. You want to keep crushing golf balls because you're like, oh, it feels so good.
Yeah, yeah.
The problem is the next day you now have used, like, you're tired, right? Yeah. So now your muscles aren't firing the same. The CNS needs to recover, like all these other things, right? And so you probably fatigued yourself because you've done so much. So now usually, I don't know about you, usually after my best day of hitting, the next day is usually my worst day, right? And then, and I go the opposite way, and I'm like, then I'm frustrated, right? So then I tell hitters this from a mindset and mentality standpoint is, like, first off, there's no finish line, right? There is no finished swing. There is no destination. Like, every day for as long as you play this game, you will be working on your swing. There is no, oh, I'm this good and I'm good now. So stop trying to fight where you think one day your swing's just going to feel amazing and you'll never have to work on your swing again.
No,
like, that's not how it works.
I've been doing the same drills for like 20 years now. I've morphed them, tweaked them. I've added some pieces. I've got some baseline technical swing practice. I got my baseline performance practice. I'm constantly adjusting feels. I'm always kind of looking at the video, making sure that things are time and space about the same spot. And then it's just adaptability. Like, I don't feel right today, but I got to go play. Like, I got to get this goddamn ball in the hole.
100%.
I don't want to go shoot a million. So how do I do that? That's where, like, having a really solid pattern, understanding what you need to do, understanding the task, understanding how can I adapt today. I think golfers, when they practice, and even I try to get them in here, like, I call it train ugly. Like, who gives a shit about where the ball goes? Like, try to understand, like, okay, I got to get the ball to start over here more to the right. I got to get it started a little bit left. Like, create these feels with numbers. Like, I want this ball to start 6 degrees to the right. How the hell do you do that? Like, I can do that, 14 million different ways to get that ball 6 degrees to the right. Some more efficient and effective than others, but I can still do it. So some of that playing on your own, I think, helps you connect the neuro pathways to facilitate the task.
Yeah.
And then I like to kind of have people like, okay, so the task is get it 6 degrees to the right. I'm going to watch you in my training session. I want to see what you're doing because I can see the numbers. I'm going to go help him in a second. I'll watch you. And then I'll start to see what they start to do to the swing to make it work. And then I'll step in a little bit. No, I don't want you to do that. It's got to stay here. I need you to adjust just the phase to the path.
Yeah.
You're independent of one another, right? You're starting to shove the path more to the right to try to get it to 6. No, your path stays the same. Open up the face only to the shaft. And then they're like, huh?
Yeah.
So then you have to kind of start to explain to them a little bit more how the joints work and then what controls the face that's independent of the path.
Yeah.
And then, I'll start hitting shots for people and they're like, holy shit. Like, it's like, yeah, well, you gotta understand, like, I understand the task at a really high level, not only in relation to the collision between the club and the ball, but I understand what my arms need to do, what my body needs to do, how to orientate my body into positions of time and space so that I can move a path.
Yeah.
Right. And then, okay, I'm going to shove one piece. I'm going to, train things out independent. And then I'm going to add a second layer afterwards. But if I can't do the first layer, our minds are not programmed to do two things at once.
Yeah.
So I'm going to single things out. That's why I like a lot of the bowler drill lowing. I'm going to I'm going to get rid of the legs and I'm going to emphasize just the arms.
Yes.
Right. And then, okay, then I'm going to give you back some legs. Oh,
Yeah.
I don't like it again. I'm going to get rid of them. We're
Yeah.
going to stay there until you show me that you can do this goddamn good.
Yeah.
If you can't do this good, I'm not going to go make the task more complex because you
Yeah.
can't handle it.
Yeah, and literally like you said, to another thing, what we'll do is like I'll constrain things. So you'll see me, you'll see me like I posted a hitter yesterday with like I'll put a big exercise ball and like she had it in her arms and she was hitting balls with a big exercise ball and
I
she's
saw that.
hitting, right? Well, yeah. Well, a big thing is like you said, right? She's learned to really like manipulate the club head or the bat head, right?
Mhm.
By using her arms to be able to do it, right? But I want her to get the angles with her body,
Yeah.
right? I want her to sequence well. I want her to do other things. So I constrain the movement and go, you don't have that option anymore. Your arms can't do it, right? So so now we take away those options, constrain things where then now they have to create it in a different way. Just like you're saying, to be able to create that for sure.
Yeah, like I like constraints approach, right? So like for me, like people laugh, and I've seen some people kind of joke around with things, right? And say like bad things about what the Megzers is. It's like as soon as you start talking bad about this, you have no idea what in the world you're yapping about. You need to stop. Because that is stupid. This thing is so good, it's not even funny.
I have so many times where I'll post something and somebody will have like 7, 10 constraints, put on them, and they're like, they're like, what? And I'm like, well, we slowly built to this, and also too, if you weren't there in the person, like you wouldn't understand, right?
Yeah.
So, but at the same time, it's just like understanding. It's understanding. Like at the end of the day, the athlete, if you're there, like yes, and we're explaining it in the moment, it doesn't feel like a lot to the athlete. They're like, oh yeah, it's actually making it simpler for the mover. It's simpler to go, oh yeah, I just got to, again, this is constraining all these options that I no longer have.
Yeah.
So it takes away. Imagine this. It's way more complex to have 10 options than to have one.
Yeah.
If I have one, I only can go that way. So if anything, actually to the learner, it makes things more simple because it eliminates everything. You know what I'm saying? So that's where I think it's a big useful tool of like understanding that, with it as well. I just wanted to notate because I saw Kylie make a note in there. I just wanted to say thank you. I'm happy that we could help you in some way, some fashion from afar. Love it. So anyways.
Yeah, absolutely. Because again, like it's kind of what I've talked to Dr. Tyson and Scott and Manavian. It's just like, and some of the live stuff. It's like when you're ready, hun, we can go right into the Megza Bay. Is that there is just some real craziness being posted on freaking social media,
of course,
and then people doing shit.
Yeah,
and it's just like, what the hell, like, and then like you see some of it. It's got like 5,000 likes. It's just like, I would never in the world ever have a player do that stuff. Oh, hold on a second. So, sorry, bud. Hold on. Did you get to 90? No. Oh, come on. What was your score? Yes, you're on Instagram Live. So, yeah. So, what was your high score today? 89.2. So, what was the rule? Or what? No. You have your video. It was over 90 or what? I have your piece number, but I can still hear. 91. What? Yes. Did you do your push-ups yet? No, you can't leave. No, we had an agreement. No, you cannot leave.
I can pull up the video. You didn't say that.
Yes, I did. You had to get. Yeah, go look it up, or else 90 push-ups. You had to beat the score. Don't get out of your punishment. That's not even nice. That's not even nice. That's not even nice. What? 90 for 90. Yeah. And then get 90 push-ups.
You didn't say that.
Yeah. Yes, 90 for 90. We talked about that the other day. Don't be lying. Don't be lying. Go do your push-ups. Rules are rules. So if everybody on social media is like, dude, rules are rules.
No.
Yes. Yes.
Rules.
Rules are rules. Yes, rules are rules.
You got to come clean.
You made a bet. You had to come clean. Yeah, see, look, that's what people say. Okay, over there. It's good for you. You're trying to hit it further anyways. We got to get a little stronger. Good. We're going to get it even further now after you do 90 push-ups. Maybe in like a couple of days when your body relaxes. I'm not mean. Don't give me that. I'm not mean.
So I'm just coaching. That's all.
I'm just coaching. That's it. Don't be mad at the coach. It's not hazing. What is wrong with these young kids? It's like hazing. I'm bullying. No, like we made a bet, 90 for 90. That's it. That's not bullying.
Is what it is.
Not even close.
Yeah.
You should be a role model, right? For Miss Keelan, who's young and aspires to be like you. What kind of message are you sending to this youth if you're not doing what you said you were going to do? Right, Keelan? Right? See? Don't be trying to get out of your... Yeah. 90 for 90. That was the whole agreement.
That's funny.
All right, bye.
Oh,
Yeah.
the question I was going to ask you, I'll ask you too, because we talked about the water bags, water well. Have you gotten to play with the farm board so much? I didn't know if you what you gotten to do with them and what you felt.
I've played a little bit with the small one, right? But I haven't really played a whole lot with the big one. Like I said, I got back. I haven't been. Don't you? I'm making it worse next time you come in. You cheetah. I haven't played with the big one yet. I have jacked around a lot with the smaller ones.
Mm-hmm.
One of these days, I'm going to go and play with it on gears. I'm really curious to see what happens with certain pieces. The biggest thing so far that I'm really, really liking is the both those water balls. The small pieces are really good. I've got some protocols for some of the players.
The big thing,
still working out some of the
big
kinks.
thing
But
I was interested. I think that would be like you're talking about too. Is I think the big thing that the boards do that I really like about the individual boards is one, emphasize the stability of the lower body. I don't want my legs pushing in crazy directions, right? The other thing is it emphasizes you not shifting from side to side and using like more of like a horizontal, but actually
hold on 1 second, bud. Hold on.
Yeah.
Hold on. Where's that, hon? Absolutely, hon. Okay, so you said
yeah, it emphasizes you creating torques instead of like pushing side to side, or again utilizing like a big vertical because I'm coming out of the ground. If anything, like you said, this is the big thing. Actually, I should have said this earlier, and I'm so happy we talked about it now. If you stayed to this long, now you're going to get a nugget real quick.
Yeah.
The other thing I think is so important, like you talked about with verticals, is what we don't think about is the vertical the opposite way, which is down, right? So accepting, well, if I want to create a big torque, I have to be in the ground. So if I want to create like large torques and counter torques, look, I don't need the ground to create force. I need the ground to create maximum force. Yeah. And so what I mean, the floor is just the most stable object that I have access to. So for me to come unplugged from it, I can't utilize it very well. So like you're saying, if somebody's just going, fall into it and just jumping up out of the ground, you're going to miss that counter torque. And again, along with that, you're going to get more of this like draggy, like come into it. Right. And so again, it's not to say that some golfers, obviously like their feet coming out of the ground. It's just how they're doing it. Like for example, I had a biomechanist that talked about these big vertical forces. Right. And so they took a lead hitter and they're like, hey, your vertical force in your front leg is lower than we want it to be. So then the biomechanist was like, you need to slam your front foot in the ground when you stride. And I'm like, no, don't do that. Right. So you got to understand, like, again, how those forces are actually created, because that's why I talk about it like exit velocity. There's a lot of ways to create the same speed, right?
Yes.
That's the end of the equation. That's the equal. That's the result. There's a lot of things that could create that same result. So ground force, yes, torques are going to get some horizontal shear forces. Well, I could just push this way and I could just push this way. And that's actually where one of your other guys was having that conversation the other day, talking about, I got to push the ground and then that should rotate my hips, right? And it's like, no, I can push like this and my hips don't go anywhere. No. But if I create a torque with my pelvis, the ground will create those shear forces. Yeah. So again, I could have the same forces, but create a completely different movement. Right. So because it matters the angles and positioning of my pelvis to actually do that. But again, it's middle out, not, distal, like up my body. Right.
And again, like you said it perfectly. Like you have people who are just looking at the data who don't understand the task, or maybe they themselves can't perform the task,
Correct.
trying to look at data and then trying to extrapolate what they think somebody's doing.
Correct.
And then there's a lot of times, like really elite level athletes, they can't even explain what they do.
Because they
right?
just feel
Like-
they just feel it or naturally do it. Or I had a hitter one time, a really good, like makes millions of dollars in the big leagues, all this stuff, like a pretty good hitter, right? He comes in, we did a session together. I had him literally feeling his front shoulder, his front hip as he swung, as he was in his downswing, as you say, like in golf, right? I had him literally trying to fire this way so his body was trying to do this. I said, the only thing going forward is the bat head, right? So he does the swing. I show him the video and I said, it doesn't look like that at all, hon. He goes, that literally just blew my mind. I will never look at film the same ever again because I'm trying to do this, but meanwhile, that's the cleanest swing that I've ever seen. And you would, by watching video, you would have no idea. You would have absolutely no idea what is actually happening because you're not seeing what's going on under the hood. You're not seeing what the body is actually doing and what the muscles and the fascia and like everything that's, how all of that's happening. You're just seeing again, people confuse kinetics with kinematics. And they interflex the two of understanding like, okay, the forces and then the movement. Those are different things. And how I create those forces is a whole nother layer underneath that side. But a lot of people see, just because they see the hips rotating, it doesn't mean that I should be trying to spin my hips as hard as I can and understanding what these athletes are actually doing. So when I show athletes that and I connect that for them, it's like, hey, what you're trying to do and the forces you're creating, and I can show you, which you would be like gears, but less like kinematics and from the ground force. I'm like, look how different this is. Now you're creating the data you're doing. And to your point as well, I've had biomechanists try to train players and then their data gets terrible. And then they got to remember, good movement creates good data, right? If you're going off of, if you're trying to tell them the wrong movement, the data is going to look awful. It's going to look like you're going to see all of a sudden they start dragging. All of a sudden their vertical forces get terrible. All of a sudden all these things start happening because what you're coaching is not actually working, right? Because you're coaching the wrong things. And that's why the difference of understanding where, again, I always tell the old school guys, because I don't know if it's like this in golf, but we had this whole old school area that was all built off of feel only and no tech and all these things, right? So they really pushed back against tech, but I started telling them it's the opposite. Like, yo, with data, I can tell you why you're right. I can explain to you with these areas why you're right. Now, also too, you're the guy that should be using the tech the most because you, instead of looking for a needle in a haystack, you're going in looking for something that you know that works and you're trying to figure out exactly why, right? And so you're not just randomly going into it. You're running a study and you can go, hey, see, like that's why I found you had biomechanists, you had the Dodgers have had biomechanical data, especially force play data for over 10 years, right? And then I'm coming to the biomechanists that, 5-6 leading experts in the world, of biomechanists that are looking at ground force data and they've never seen this reverse torque and understood it. And it's like, but why can I find it? Because I'm a coach. And I know what I was going in looking for, right? Where they're like, man, we've never noticed this before. Because they're like, yeah, because you were thinking, sometimes they think if you go in there, you have a confirmation bias, but like everybody has a confirmation bias.
Absolutely.
When a biomechanist goes in looking at data, he has a confirmation bias on what he's trying to see. So he thinks the swing works like some big turn and some levers and all of a sudden this thing happens. But when you don't actually know what's actually happening, it becomes a really big thing. And so that's why it's really important of like what's actually going on.
Yeah. And again, like you just said it right there, you have to understand the task, right? There was somebody like, I've learned some stuff from this one guy, right? But a lot of his research is like a foam ball and no ball flight. Like, the impact between because you guys use, so like you got some new balls, like different weights. Right.
We use heavy balls.
The anticipation of it changes how the contraction of the muscles are going to work.
Yes. So
then there's an outcome, and if you're removing the bad outcome, then they're like, whatever, I'm going to move, and then it's going to throw off all my sequencing and timings and motions. And then you put the ball in the way. Now my head's going to go, holy shit, where the hell is this thing going? And then it creates all sorts of, put it back.
He's like, I'm a dad. and and no, literally, this is how I connected the two between martial arts and something that we had happen here in the facility. So martial arts, they hit these heavy bags all the time, right? In golf, you guys like strike the bags, all the stuff, right? But the thing with it, right, is we started training our hitters in house, and we have these heavy balls. Everybody had heavy balls. We all hit heavy balls, right? Our heavy balls were different colors. The reason that they were different colors was because of pitchers in baseball. They would just go, oh, I got 3 throws with the light blue ball, 3 throws with the dark blue ball, so it makes it easier to know what you're going to throw and do it faster. So then when it came into hitting, they just brought these colored balls over to hitting, right? So like you were saying, we're doing a contest between, they're competing, right? We're tossing the balls. And one of the hitter goes, that's not fair. They're getting the light blue balls. And I said, oh. Immediately light bulb in my head. You guys are cheating based on what you're anticipating the ball to be coming through, and again the fireworks. You know, good timing there. You know that the heavier ball is a harder task, and you have to hit it square. You have to stay through it. You have to transfer force better. You have to do all these things. So then, what did we do? We countered and made all of our heavy balls all the same color. So now. Then what they would do is they're hitting 1.5 pounds. We're hitting 1.5 pounds ball, right? Boom, they're hitting this ball. They're like, man, that thing is so heavy, right? Then all of a sudden we throw a 5-ounce ball. They strike it and they're like, what in the world? It's like when you go to pick something up and you think it's like 20 pounds, but it's only really light. We again, your body is trying to use as little force as possible to complete the task. It wants to be, it's lazy, right? The CNS is lazy. It wants to use as little as possible, reserve as much energy as I can, right? But the problem is performance is the opposite. I want maximum force right now. I want all these things that I can do. So what we started doing is then when they started realizing, hey, I want you to hit every ball like it's the heavy bag. I want you to hit every ball like it's the heavy ball. Now, all of a sudden, we started seeing like these extreme results where like these guys. So now when we hit like, for example, we created these machine balls that we were hitting. And it's like, okay, we have the normal balls, but then we have the heavier machine balls that we only made like 1.5 ounces heavier for baseball. It's like hitting a softball compared to baseball. But now as they hit them, they realize like, like when the ball is lighter, I do start to cheat. I start to clip. I start to do all these other things. So it forces me. It's a constraint. I have a different object that I have to strike. I ask them all the time, if that was a bowling ball flying at you, how would you hit it? And they're like, oh yeah, I wouldn't be trying to create maximum speed, spinning, yanking, all those things. Like now all of a sudden I'm trying to strike the bowling ball, right? Because it's going to hit me. So I gotta hit it, right? And so that becomes like a super useful thing that we developed as well of like why we do that is teaching their body to recruit in a certain way, sequence in a certain way. And again, for a heavy bag in martial arts, when you kick a heavy bag in martial arts, dude, if you don't hit it right, it hits you. So I have to strike it and learn how to strike it and sequence so that my energy is actually going into the bag. And so that we utilize that with really heavy balls. And then this is the other thing in our sport too as well, is we're hitting a ball that's coming like at the elite levels, 90 plus miles, probably almost 100 miles an hour, right? Yeah. That 5-ounce ball, when it's moving 100 miles an hour, is not 5 ounces. I have to redirect a lot of force and get that ball to go back the opposite direction. So when we're hitting front toss and the ball's coming at you at 15 miles an hour, it's not the same impact. So hitters start to cheat based on the task. And then that was where the understanding. So we do front toss still. A lot of new school guys will that are pure, newer in the game. And the old school wisdom is they love front toss where they flip it, from the L screen, underhand. But new school are like, well, it's not the same impact. Guys start to cheat. Well, we blend the two. We do front toss, but we hit heavy balls. So when we hit heavy balls, it's a harder strike, and you have to mimic what you're actually seeing, in real time with the, baseball and the forces you have to create, hitting it square, all those other things. So, again, like you said, it's a mix between all of that stuff. And again, we blend old and new, like old school wisdom to give us direction for our future. And I always tell the old school guys, you were right, but there's more, right? I'm standing on your shoulders. I'm not trying to reinvent the wheel or restart, but also remember this too, right? When I love when people say that, oh, stop trying to recreate the wheel. I always say, dude, the tires on my truck are not the first wheels they ever came out with. Those things are really advanced. They have so
Same
many
thing with
things
the
to make sure they
cars.
protect me.
Yeah.
It's still the same concept. It's just better. We stood on the shoulders of all the information, the wisdom that came before us, and that's all I'm doing. Someone's going to come out before, dude. Here in 20 years, the stuff I know is going to be basic.
Yeah.
It's going to be what everybody knows. But again, we're all standing on the shoulders of the ones that come before us to understand and teach better and coach better, yada yada.
And that's the biggest thing is it's take what we had, not discredit them, continue to build upon it, right? Because that is what society has done. Evolution as humans, everything has gotten better. Look at the dang phones, right?
Yes.
I'm 50. I'm going to be 50 this year. Like,
Yes.
we had these damn dookie bag phones at the beginning.
Yeah.
Right? You had dial-up internet. Now I got everything on my phone, which is smaller. The cameras, like in golf, we don't really use cameras anymore. We just use the phones because the phones are so much
we couldn't even
better.
do this. I'm sure you've had this comment too because you guys have so much tech. They'll say, "Oh, back in the day, they didn't need all that stuff. Why do we need it?" And I always say this. This is my response. I'll give you one to get back. I go, "Yeah, back in the day, we used to also use hammer and nails to build houses, and now we use nail guns." It's like, yes. Is it the same concept? Like, I can just do it faster. I can get you results quicker. And instead of like, and also you look in baseball, right? Like in baseball, a lot of people say that like, "Oh yeah, we used to have guys that threw hard back in the day." It's like, yeah. But like now it's not one every 100 guys. It's like now everybody can do this. And now now the average fastball speed is way faster, right? Like now the elite athleticism, like back in the day, like I actually have a presentation I've been doing lately of showing like how strength training has progressed through the sport. And like, you got like Babe Ruth and they're doing he's just trying to stay in general shape because he was like, drinking and like all these other things late in his career. He just needed to get in general shape. And so I'm trying to show like how this has progressed over the years, right? But it's just so funny. It's just like, yes, like, again, they didn't need this back in the day, but also too, like, yes, I could do it slower with more time, or I could just use a nail gun and we can get this house up and I can get 3 houses up in the same amount of time that you can do one. And also the difference in baseball too is I can't play golf till I'm really old. I can't like in baseball terms, right? Baseball, I got a very limited window to be good. Yeah. If I'm not good, the game moves on. Like you can go play adult ball if you want, but like to play in the major leagues and to be drafted and have the time to do that, like, if you're not through AA by the time you're like 23, like, woo, yeah, you're in some tough water to try to dig your way out of that one, you know? And so, especially for hitters, right? So that's where it becomes a big deal where it's like, I need to get these guys results really fast or that guy's career, and a lot of times, I don't know about you, when I'm doing these major league hitters, they're coming in and they're going, "Hey, if I don't hit this year, my career's over." Done. So now there's a big difference. I tell guys, there's a time for surgery and there's a time for, just hey, take your vitamins, right? Let's do these things. Like the younger kids, I can be a little bit more progressive and slower and all these other things. But the major league hitters, I'm like, like a lot of those guys come in and I'm like, we're performing surgery. And also, they do the magical pixie dust thing. They come in and they go, "Oh, hey, I got 2 weeks with you. I need to be able to hit way better this year." And I'm like, okay, so we got to do some drastic things to really get their body to understand. And then we have to compound reps on top of that on their own, right? So again, that would be a time where we really need surgery. So I think about that like all the time is just understanding, what that looks like and like how we train and like, all those things as well. It's like, it's different comparatively, understanding the context of what's going on, right?
Absolutely, my friend. But listen, man, I truly appreciate it. I got to go and finish up with the player because we got to do a couple things from her practice. Yeah. I want to do this again. Like I don't want to try to make this on a regular basis and maybe even kind of show people some drills, right? Maybe you and I kind of doing something just a little bit more privately, talk about how like what you do with your baseball players and then what I would do with my players, and then put something that would be live. Like my whole goal with this, like I tell people all the time, like I prefer not to do this stuff, right? But I'm kind of pushing myself because I prefer like to me information is very valuable. Yeah. Right. But I'm also getting to a point where I guess maybe just I'm old. I just can't deal with certain things anymore. I don't know. But I want to help golfers out. I've always wanted to help golfers out. I want to try to help the masses out so they don't get the gibberish nonsense that they're seeing all over freaking Instagram, right? And I'm not even sure if in your sport it's anything as crazy as it is in our sport, which I would imagine it probably is. So to try to help players understand like what really it takes to improve and to keep moving through the levels of the sport, and that we have windows of opportunity that we'd be able to do certain things in. And if we don't have those things, like you becoming elite is like, good luck, not a chance in hell. Right? Yeah. You got adult league golf, adult league baseball, go play softball, something like that. But like that's kind of my goal. Like I'd like to bring you in on this as well. That's why like Manavian's a part of this equation, a really smart guy when it comes to the golf. Fitting, 3D, Dr. Tyson, you know, I brought in Scott. I've kind of talked to a few other people as well who I kind of respect. You know, to try to bring that in where it can kind of get the voice out is like, you know, there's some things that you can do, other things like stop worrying about social media and certain facets. Like some of that stuff is just about clicks. And if you try to apply that's just going to hurt you more than anything else. So I truly appreciate you coming on. I appreciate the stuff, guys. Like I'm telling you, golf instructors, like reach out to Joey. Like I'll show you some of the protocols as soon as I start to kind of complete it. I got some gears testing that I want to do before I start sharing some stuff. But I'm telling you right now, like that stuff right there for golf training, right, is kind of like what Joey was talking about earlier, changing the balls and things along that nature. Like we've got to train golfers to be athletes in terms of striking, acceleration, deceleration. This is the biggest reason why I kind of went indoor, even though like I came from the cold weather, is it gives me a better opportunity to have a lot of shit everywhere. My place is crazy full with shit, right? So that we can kind of make reps better. If we can make reps better, we can get golfers to get better at a faster rate. And that's ultimately what I'm trying to do. It's basically the same thing that you're doing. Like if we wanted to kind of, you know, bullshit people, I'd be sitting on the range leaning against my club, and I would have saved a hell of a lot of goddamn money and spending it on what I spend. And it's the same thing with you, right? You know, so there's a difference, right? So that's kind of what I want to be able to do. I want to show people what we do, how we use tools, and then how, like, as I want to talk to you about some of the stuff that I'm doing with my boys with the striking stuff. And maybe you can kind of help me out because I like the striking pieces. Because I think the striking, you know, maybe the movements are a little bit different, but I still think some of the striking components are interchangeable between baseball to golf, hockey to golf. And I want more information about how I can kind of make the baseball striking stuff that I've done to make it better and to make sure that I'm seeing what I'm seeing and how I can kind of transfer it. So I'd appreciate, you know, a little bit of insight from you and on that. And like I said, share it if you want to share it. That would be up to you how much you want to share. But like I said, I think it would be really cool for us to kind of collaborate between the baseball and the golf. You know, data-driven guys, training people, being a little outside of the box, I think would be a really cool thing for us to kind of continue to do.
Yeah, no, I think it would be great. And I also, too, I was going to ask you, too, on the same side of this, we have a podcast, too. So I'm going to take the audio from, I'm sure you're going to post this live.
Yes.
I'll take the audio from this, too, and then put it to our audience through the podcast, too, as well.
Awesome.
I think it would be good, you know, informational for them, too, as well. So definitely looking forward to it. I think it'll be good. And then also, too, we talked about it. We'll see at some point. I'd love to slide out there, or you slide out here to Vegas. And
yes, absolutely. We can do a little. You come here to Dallas. I'll go, I want to go to Vegas. So
cool.
It's another reason to go.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, I'm pulling your
All
arm.
right,
I know.
Awesome, man. Thanks, bud.
All right, cool. See you.
Take care.